Welcome to the 13th recorded lecture of my course entitled FCE 207, Haiti, the most important country in the world. My usual preface here, this is not a college class. These are just the lectures from my college class. Learning is active, not passive. YouTube learning is too passive. So feel free to take notes. Go ahead. It might be useful. As again, I'm not an expert on Haiti. This is a course for 200 level students for their otherworld general education requirement. So I think this class is important, and I think I teach it well, so that's why I teach it. But if you are an expert in Haiti and you want to correct me on anything, please do. I'll be checking the comments all the time. So let's get into the class where I am going to share my PowerPoint. Let's see, you see my PowerPoint. Continue to share, screen sharing. Okay. Students and friends, I am Professor Sky. My name is perhaps known to you. I've undertaken to teach about Haiti. I want a curiosity and a complex thirst for understanding to reign in this class. I am working to help that happen. Unite yourselves, students, and learn with me for the same cause. So if you're taking notes at home, this is how I set up my students to take their notes. Toussaint versus everybody. We're going to be talking about Toussaint as a complicated and fascinating figure. I'm going to start out, I'm going to explain that we are going to be going over how four forces are going to be boiled down into one. This is where I'm just going to stop for 1 second to just remind you that Toussaint is a very complex character. He has a lot of dictatorial tendencies, and often he can be seen as just simply being a dictator. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's fair. I think we need to think of it as a very complicated situation in which somebody is trying to figure out how to maintain not just power, but how to maintain freedom for his people, how to do what's best for his people, which sometimes is asking them to do things which they either don't want to do or potentially cannot keep doing. So he's a very complicated figure. I think he's one of the most interesting figures in world history, which is why I spend so much time talking about him. So I hope you will enjoy as we go into his consolidation of power, which you can either see as him being an autocrat who's trying to take over and monopolize power, or someone realizing that the only way for formerly enslaved Black people to have a space where they are safe and free is to be led by a formerly enslaved Black person who has their best interest at heart. Okay? I'm not going to give you an answer one way or the other on what kind of guy Toussaint is. I'm just going to say that's the question. I had my students remind me of how Toussaint managed to get rid of his other rivals who were aligned with the French or aligned with the freed slaves. Go back to class number 12 if you can't answer this question and rewatch it. So Sontonax leaves, and he could say, finally, I am the only power on this island. But of course, that's not true because France is going to send another representative. Most of the sources for this are the Revolutions podcast, episodes 12 and 13 of the Revolutions podcast. In addition, a little bit from Haiti, the Aftershocks of History, and a little bit from, sorry, I have a bell right here, a little bit from C.L.R. James's Black Jacobins. But the way that Mike Duncan refers to it is bumbling white guy. So we have one of the worst bumbling white guys. There's a whole series of bumbling white guys who have been sent by France to care for Saint-Domingue, the best of which was Lavaux. Oh, no, maybe the best of which was Sontonax, and the worst of which was Galbaud. But right here near the bottom of the ranking of bumbling white guys sent into a situation which they have no possible ability to comprehend or master in any possible way at all. People completely unqualified for what they're asked to do. We're going to get this guy who is going to be sent, and his name is de Duville. Then England, still thinking about what to do, still kind of pushing at the edges. They are going to send this gentleman named Maitland. Now, England is trying to get out. But before we even discuss them, there's one more force. You see, France, we're talking Toussaint, and the French forces have been trying to get rid of Rigaud's emergency powers, trying to get his emergency powers removed because he has way too much power down here in the south. He was able to refuse the French forces, and he is now in control of this land, and he is a rival to Toussaint. So these are the four people vying for power. First, we have Maitland. England controlled these three ports. They had a strong navy, but I believe CLR James says it better than I would. The drain of men and money was too great. By the end of 1796, after 3 years of war, the British had lost the West Indies, 80,000 soldiers, including 40,000 actually dead, the latter number exceeding the total losses of Wellington's army from death, discharges, desertion, and all causes from the beginning to the end of the Peninsular War. It is a disaster for England, so they want to get out. So Toussaint and Maitland meet. Now, Toussaint should be deferring to France. He should be deferring to d'Edouville, but he knows what we know, which is d'Edouville is a bumbling white guy. He doesn't know what he's doing, so he makes his own promises. These are the questions I ask my students, expecting them to have the answer. Don't worry, I'm going to tell you, but I will tell you this. D'Edouville did not like this. D'Edouville thinks they should be meeting with him because he's the representative of France. So what did they agree on? 1798. I can't see because my phone's in the way here. They agree to trade, to lift the naval blockade, to end the occupation. One of the most important things was to forgive the former soldiers. So a lot of formerly enslaved people fought alongside the British. And Toussaint, in general, he is all about no reprisals. That's his game. That's the way he does things. So he is more than happy to accept these terms and get rid of the exclusive. The exclusive, which means now England can trade with Haiti. This whole thing. This whole class started with the big whites, the slave owners and plantation owners being mad that they had to trade exclusively with France. They wanted to be able to have free trade. And this ties into something that Duncan talks about that I want to emphasize. Okay. So I'm just going to get a piece of paper here. I'm going to write this out just so that it's super clear. All right. Let me get my Sharpie. Here, I'll pause the recording. There. The more power any group in Saint-Domingue has, the more they want France to leave them alone. The less power a group of people has in France, the more they want the help of France. Less power equals France, please help. You can think of this like siblings, you know? If everything's going well and you're doing well with your siblings, you're not going to call on your parents to ask for help. If anything, you want to be just left alone to do your own thing. But let's say your brother steals your dessert, you're going to say, "Mom, Dad, please help." Like when you want help, that's when you need the bigger power. So when the whites were in power, they didn't want anything to do with France and they almost broke free. Then, when there was a slave revolt, all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, France, you have to help us. Look at how much trouble we're in because we have less power." The coloreds, the same thing. Rigaud just went against the desires of Lavaux and the French commissioners because he has power down in the south. So, France, go away. We want to be free. But as we'll see come up soon, he's going to be like, "Hey, France, I thought you were supposed to help me." The more power people have, the more they want to be separated from the people above them. That's a historical truth. Why do I call this class Haiti the most important country in the world? Because that's a universal truth that we don't think about. This is our relationship to the government. The more powerful people are, the more they want the government to leave them alone. The less powerful they are, the more they want the government to help them. I mean, it's just seen all over the place. It's how power works. There's one thing I can get through in this class that is never about race. It's always about power. How do people use and abuse power? How do the powerless react to not having power? Haiti is a never-ending lesson of that through the lens of race. So, going back, Toussaint has all of his generals who have a lot of land. He has a lot of power. He is now thinking it is time to move away from France. He used France when he could. Now he wants them to go away. So, of course, he's going to make a deal with the English, which is going to piss off the French because they want to have the exclusive rights to trade with Saint-Domingue. Also, he promises not to export the slave revolution to Jamaica. I try to explain to my students that, like, there's this theory that, like, ideas can be contagious and that the second half of the 20th century was dedicated mostly to American forces trying to stamp out communism by treating it like a disease that could be caught. Well, that's how they thought of the liberation doctrine. and he promised not to share it to Jamaica, but he was obviously busy enough. I don't know how hard that was for him. So now there are three forces. England has officially left the stage. It is now France, Rigaud in the south, and Toussaint up north. Now there are three. Now, what about this Dedouville guy? Dedouville is not happy that Toussaint made all of these arrangements, that he went over France's head. And we can just imagine what their meeting was like. It probably was very cold. I ask my students this, and then I'll just tell you. What was de Duville trying to do? He was trying to reclaim a lot of the land from Toussaint's officers, give it back to some of the old slave owners, which, Toussaint himself was not entirely against returning some land to some white people, but he's trying to take it from Toussaint and his soldiers, and he's trying to instill cultivator reform. So much of this class is about the plantation model and what Jean Casimir calls the counter-plantation model. This is the conflict. Toussaint believes in the plantation model, but this idea of forcing an extended term that you have to serve on a plantation, he sees as untenable. And he's also putting in more and more and more and more white officers. I think if Toussaint was looking at the situation, he would see France is eyeing up potentially bringing back slavery. And of course, he also called him, de Duville referred to Toussaint as a monkey with a handkerchief. So this kind of bumbling white guy stuff is a real problem. It all comes to a head in Fort Liberté in the north, where Moise, who is Toussaint's adopted nephew. So not adopted son, so he's not going to inherit anything, but like he's family. He's like one of the most popular people on the island. And de Duville sees him in Fort Liberté and calls him an insurrectionist, says he's a problem, it says he needs to be taken out, and this is the last straw. We don't know what he looked like, so I just took a picture of Isaac Hayes from the cover of Black Moses, because Moise means Moses, which makes him literally a Black Moses. The fate of Black Moses, of Moise, is a sad one. So just understand now, he is Toussaint's nephew. So Moise reacts along with his help of the General Dessalines. They kick him out. They kick out de Duville. They said, hey, listen, we need to have a talk with you. And he got on a boat and he left. But before he left, he dropped a grenade. Do you want to see the grenade? Do you want to see the grenade that de Duville dropped? Do you know what's like the worst thing he could have done for the freedom, the happiness, the livelihood of the people of Saint-Domingue? I'll let you think about it. What could he say while leaving? What could he say? He's gone. There are only two. But as he left, he said, before I go, in the eyes of France, Rigaud is not below Toussaint. Ever since Toussaint saved Lavaux from the insurrection by Villatte, Toussaint has been above Rigaud. Here, France is saying they're officially equal. I go back to this. How much you believe in what France says is directly proportionate to how much power you have. So Rigaud has less power than Toussaint. So even though he defies France when they try to take over the South, he is going to rely on what France says to feed the narrative that he is equal to Toussaint. C.L.R. James says it thusly. What happened at this interview, between Eduville and Rigaud is one of the great tragedies of Saint-Domingo. Eduville overwhelmed Rigaud with attentions, promised that France would give him proofs of high consideration, bewailed the evils of the colony, told him that the surest way to assuage them was to help him achieve his secret instructions, the withdrawal of supreme power from Toussaint Louverture. Rigaud seized the chance to put himself right with France and ruined himself, his caste. By that, he means the colored people of Saint-Domingue. If this is your first video, I explain the terminology in all my other videos. The term colored, black, and white is the nomenclature that is used to describe these people, even though it is not proper nomenclature now. Ruined himself, his caste, and his country for a generation. because he helped to spur on what was going to be the Civil War. Now, at the same time, America and France are in what's called a quasi-war, a little tiny naval war. And in that war, like there's a blockade. But Toussaint's able to carve out a little clause that says that America can trade with him. More power, France go away. This is exactly the kind of thing that he is directly going against France's interest. France is trying to be at war with America, and he is treating America like it's an ally. Why? Because he's thousands of miles away from France, and he's hundreds of miles away from America. So he is not, he needs this trade for his people. So this is going to lead to the War of Knives. We're not going to watch this. We're not going to watch this, which is what we call the war, the little civil war between Toussaint and Rigaud. Very often, as things often are in history, it is reduced to a simple question of race, which is to say the coloreds versus the blacks. Be not deceived, my students. That is an oversimplification that is not entirely accurate. If you read C.L.R. James, he provides quotes from Rigaud where he says, I'm too much of a believer of the rights of man to think there's one color in a culture that is superior to another. Now, the way he behaved was that colors were superior, but he's making it explicit that that's not how he feels. Toussaint disdained the charge of hating mulattoes by pointing out a great number of them who were fighting in his army against Rigaud. So in both cases, they both had members of the other enemy races in their armies and in their care. So it's not a simple question of race, but race was used to propagandize the war, to say it was one against the other. Toussaint reminded everybody of the Swiss, which if at this point you don't know who the Swiss are, please go back and just watch the whole class. The enslaved soldiers who were promised freedom by the coloreds in their fight against the whites in the South, who were then sent off to Jamaica and then sent back to Saint Domingue and then were killed and then left to die on a boat. That treachery still stays with the people of Haiti to this day. And Rigaud says that Toussaint is selling out to the British and trying to bring back slavery. They are also racializing it. As Mike Duncan points out, these two guys are actually pretty similar. I mean, they have a different upbringing. You know, Rigaud was a goldsmith, educated in France, and Toussaint was born enslaved and was a driver and a coachman and all that. But in reality, as he puts it, there are two men running authoritarian labor regimes. Mike F. and Duncan, everybody. But you know, the army sizes. Each one of these little representations of a man represents 1,000 soldiers. So I'll let you count. How many thousands of soldiers did Rigaud have? That's right, 15. So, you know, Toussaint only had 10. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, he had 20. Oh, that's more. Oh, he had 30. That's twice as many. Oh, he had 40. Oh, he had 50. 50 versus 15. Which number is bigger? You tell me. So even if Toussaint was not a cunning general, which he was, the numbers were always going to favor his side anyways, and Rigaud wasn't getting any meaningful help from France. Perhaps for the purposes of this class and the traces of history is the fact that we're now starting to see more representation of these underlings to Rigaud and Toussaint who are going to be very important for the rest of the class, ridiculously important, as in multiple classes on these people each. Like the first strike was by Rigaud with Pétion. Pétion, whose father was a big white, whose mother was colored. So he is technically a quadroon according to the bunk pseudoscience of people like Saint-Méry. He was educated in France like many well-to-do coloreds. He was loyal to France throughout the war, which meant he fought alongside Toussaint and his forces, but then defected to Rigaud in 1799. And this is a person who's going to be all over this class. Toussaint had to undergo many multiple assassination attempts. He had to crush insurrections. And when he had to do that, he had to send in his enforcer, Dessalines. Now, who was Dessalines? Dessalines, one of the most important figures in Haitian history, probably number two after Toussaint, was a Creole. Mike Duncan said he was born in Guinea. I don't know why he said that. I believe it's well understood that he was born in Haiti, but if you are a Haitian expert, you please tell me, why is there a disparity there? Made a driver, part of Jean-Francois's forces. So if you don't remember, Jean-Francois was one of the first generals of the slave armies. He sided with the Spanish, and then he ended up leaving and going back and living in Spain, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Very important figure who just exited the scene in the last class. But he was also under Toussaint, and Toussaint kept on promoting him. And he was like the bad cop. Listen, in most authoritarian structures, in most revolutionary structures, it's a pretty consistent thing that you will have the good cop and the bad cop, the principal and the vice principal. You know how, I don't know if you went to an American high school. The principal is usually a nice guy that everybody likes, who doesn't do the reprimands, the punishments, the detention, all that. He usually has a vice principal who's the mean guy. I had a vice principal named Mr. Schlesinger. He was a son of man. First, you went walking around in the hallways with the beanbag when I asked you not to have the beanbag. Anyways, Mr. Schlesinger, you know? Whereas the principal was a nice guy, and that's a good division. In revolutions, we often have that where the leader is a nice guy, and then he has someone underneath him who does all this dirty work. That's Dessalines. And he is generally known for being explicitly pro-black, anti-white, and anti-colored. We are going to get more to that in the future. The rebels were put down up north. Some of the time they were displayed like that, led by Dessalines. But really what we're going to talk about is this little port down here. Again, this is the map of Haiti that I drew. I really invite you to draw your own map. Send it to me on Instagram. One of you already has. It's very good. Please send them to me. I will look at them. They're very cool. It's very useful for you to understand the distances, the spaces of all these places we're talking about. And Jacmel is all the way down there in the south, right? We're talking Rigaud territory. And Dessalines lays siege to it. History does not, the word siege should terrify you. You should hear the word siege and get the same feeling you get with like terrorist attack, like airplane running into a building, like some kind of visceral feeling, because sieges are brutal and inhumane. If you study French history, there's a lot of really big sieges, La Rochelle and Alesia, all the way throughout history. It works like this. You block people so they can't leave until they run out of food and resources, and then they starve to death or submit. So it's brutal. And that's what he did. Well, that's what they did. 4,000 people die of hunger. Now, how come they couldn't get into, how come they couldn't get in there? Because there was a naval blockade by the French. Now, some ships loyal to Toussaint could get in, but they were ones from America. So they had these special passports that allowed them to go, and none of them were going to Jacmel. So it finally fell in 1800 after this terrible siege. Meanwhile, in the hexagon, back in France, back in the part of France that's in Europe, they keep doing things. New emissary shows up. So the new emissary shows up. The last emissary, de Deville, came to say that France was now all just one, united and equal, and the colonies are no longer colonies, they're just part of France. In 1800, Rigaud departs in defeat. It's very clear to him that he is not going to get the support of France, and he gives up the fight. The War of Knives is over. He's not gone, but he's gone for now. At the end, there's amnesty in the streets, but the prisons are invaded and many people are murdered, probably by Dessalines and his people. This is a famous quote from Toussaint to Dessalines. I asked you to trim the tree, not tear it up by the roots. This goes back to that dynamic where Papa Toussaint, as many people called him, had to be gentle and nice and kind. And he had to, hey, Jean-Jacques, who told you to kill all those people? Don't tell them it was me. Who told you? Not me. Who told you to kill all those people? You did it yourself? Jean-Jacques. Not, hey, people, if it were up to me, they'd be fine. But, what are you going to do, right? He's a hero of our liberation. Yeah, people make mistakes. It's part of revolution. And I'm not even sure it's the wrong part. I don't even have an answer for you about whether or not that kind of violence is necessary to uphold a revolution. I don't know what those people in those jail would have done if they were let free, if they were let there to rot. I don't have answers for you. I'm just telling you this is the history as I understand it. And then there was one. So Toussaint is the king, or he is the sole representative of France, or the most visible representative of France. There's no colored army. There's no British army. The Spanish are already gone. But there are problems. Like, he needs soldiers, not cultivators. Those 50,000 people who are helping to defeat Rigaud and all those people who are helping to fight the British, Toussaint is constantly in this struggle. The people of Haiti were constantly in this struggle of Saint-Domingue, of trying to figure out how much do you build up the civic infrastructure? How much do you build the plantations, the farming, the schools, all that? Versus how much do you keep the army strong? Because the second that you're caught lacking, people are going to start attacking you because nobody wants freed slaves. No one wants the contagion of freed slaves. England and France are going to, if it were up to them, they'd start slavery again just like that. They can't do it. So you got to keep that army super strong. But the stronger the army, the weaker the civil side is. So the stronger the army, the more you protect, but the less you have something to fight for. It's this terrible balance that they have to try to draw while starting with less than nothing. Starting with less than nothing, not starting with nothing, not starting at the starting line. Okay. If this is a race, these are not people standing at the starting line. They are people whose legs have been broken and were thrown into the bottom of a pit and have to scrape their way out of the pit, wait for their leg to heal, and then race. So obviously, many of them had to be soldiers. But the land and the machinery were devastated. The sugar cane, all the way back in August 1791, all those machines were broken because, of course, the first thing you do if you are enslaved is destroy the tools of your master. That'll ensure you don't get enslaved again. That'll be some kind of cathartic feeling of knowing you're never going to have to do that again. No matter what happens, no one is ever going to whip me and force me to cut down sugar cane again with all the little spiky little things on the root that cut at me and all the boiling I have to do that boils my skin and all the whips that I get. I will never have to do that again. If I destroy this machine, if I destroy this field, then I will be free of the field and the machine. And then the first thing Toussaint says is, we need the fields and the machine, but they're devastated. Even though they're trying to rebuild it, a lot of the materials are back in France. It takes 2 months to go back and forth, and everything's so confusing because they're having a big revolution and they keep just going over and over again. And this isn't the easy times with Louis XIV or even Louis XV. This is the total chaos. We're in the middle of the directory right now. Who's even going to be the leader? And then on top of that, you have all these unwilling cultivators because they just told you they wanted to cut down the whole thing. They wanted to kill the whole system. And now you're forcing them to be cultivators? And at the end of the day, why does America care about Saint-Domingue? Why does Spain care? Why does England care? And why does France care? Why does anybody care about the people of Saint-Domingue? Because they think they can be exploited. Exploited for their labor, therefore exploited for their goods, or exploited for the imports and exports that they can do with them. The more poor Haiti becomes, the more its infrastructure is destroyed, the less sugar that flows, the less importance they have to the rest of the world. The less the rest of the world is interested in allying with them, whatever color it is that's in charge, there's less and less and less interest. It's just not the same as it used to be. What are we even doing here? Said all of the rich countries in the world. There's nothing left to exploit. or there's not enough left to exploit. This new French guy shows up and talks about special laws for the colonies. And it's becoming clear that that one and indivisible thing was not happening. And the last time it wasn't clear that it was one and indivisible, there was a sense that slavery might be on its return because things are changing in France. And we finally have to get to Napoleon. So for next class, we'll talk about how then there was one, and then the white Toussaint. Napoleon Bonaparte is going to make his grand super duper entrance into this class. And the rest of this week, we'll be discussing the impact of the changes in France and the power of Napoleon versus the power of Toussaint. So there you go. There's today's class. Not a super long one, but I had them do a lot of group work today because that's what you miss when you don't take a real class. Review, writing, discussion amongst yourself, that kind of stuff. All right. But hey, I'm happy you're watching this, by the way. I don't ever want to make it seem like I'm mad that you're watching. I'm just trying to encourage people, if whenever possible, to take college classes because that's my job. Okay, there's the camera.